Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 4 of my 2001 Moebius Aries 1B build. Quite a bit more completed. As I mentioned in my last video, I had gotten a lot more done, so I already had some footage filmed. I just had to work on some extra things. So I get a lot done on the passenger section as far as the floor and getting the lighting ready. I come up with some new concepts, techniques for making some light boxes and some diffusion material for the passenger section. And I also complete the cockpit, which I will show at the end, which I think turned out fantastically. So let's go ahead and take a look at the progress that I've made. All right, so I'm designing the light box to go onto the ceiling lights, the big ones there on the outside, and I'll have to make a smaller one for the inside. So there's 14 around the outer ring and 14 on the inner ring. So I'm still undecided if I want to light all of them. Definitely the ones on the outer ring I'm going to light. The ones on the inner ring we never see lit in the movie at all. So I'm going to try just the outer ring and see what it looks like. And then if it's bright enough, I'm not going to worry about the inner, because you have that big ring of lights over the elevator that are lighting up the center as well. So I may not even need those to be lit. But I will put a cover over them to look like they could be lit. So what I decided to do to avoid a hot spot is I put the Mega SMD on the end of it, and this goes down over it. This is the wide part, which goes over the outside, and this is the thinner part that goes in the inside, and it just angles down. So it gives it plenty of light, and I've already measured out this piece, which fills in that opening. Let me show you. All right, there you go. So I measured out this section, and I put it into my Silhouette vinyl cutter software, and I cut out a part that matches it. And so I can reproduce all of these and put them around the whole thing, because this is enough to give it some nice translucence, but not show any hot spots at all. And so then when I put this light on it, bring this over here. All right, so again, the way I have it designed, it's shaped like that piece. This just goes over like this. And then when I turn it on, turn that on and see if it's going to wash out in the camera, of course. But this is how that's going to look. Let me turn that over and I'll show you how that's going to look. All right, again, it really washes it out. It is nowhere near that bright in real life. But there's also no hot spot. So even with on the camera, you don't see a hot spot, which a lot of times you can see a little bit of a hot spot because the camera makes it brighter. But in this case, there's not one at all. So that's going to work really well. And the nice thing is I can reproduce that and do it for all of them. So let me show you. All right, so here's the light box when I just unfold the parts that I had glued together just to test it. So what I can do is take a picture of this, put this into my software for the Silhouette, and just cut out this basic shape in styrene. Then all I have to do is score along those lines that are going to fold, and just fold them up and glue it together, and I have a box. And I already have that little piece cut out, so it'll be the right size for the Mega SMD to put into it. And then I can just go ahead and reproduce 14 of these, and then I'll just scale it down. I believe the inner ones are pretty much the same shape, just smaller. So I can try to scale it down until I get one the right size that works on the inside. Now, like I said, I may not do light boxes for the inner ones, but I will do these pieces for the inner ones so it looks like it has a light panel in it. And so I can just do the same thing with this, scale that down and cut it out in the styrene. And then that way I can reproduce them very quickly and just pop them out and be ready to go and start lighting the interior. All right, so I'm continuing to use my Silhouette vinyl cutter to do some other things as well, in addition to making the carpeting with that template. So I discovered that I can actually cut very thin styrene on my vinyl cutter. It doesn't cut all the way through, but it scores it deep enough that I can just go through with an X-Acto blade and just finish the job and pop it out. And it makes some nice even parts. So here what I'm doing is I am designing and cutting out the little, I call them diffusion panels for the ceiling lights. The kit comes with clear parts that some people frost or sand, but I like this diffusion better, and it's definitely thicker. So what I did was I put tape in and I cut her some vinyl. I cut around the shape, as you can see there, and that's just a picture. And I cut the basic shape out, and I took a picture of it, and I just emailed it to myself and just downloaded it on my laptop and put it in here. Same thing with this. Now this is an actual styrene piece that I made of a light box, and little square there is for the Mega SMD, and the sides fold up to make a box, a light box. So all I did was I designed it, and then once I got it shaped the way I wanted to, I flattened it out, took a picture. That pattern is just on a piece of my love seat sitting next to my workbench that I just sat it on. It has a great pattern, obviously. Took a picture again, brought it in, and then all I do is go through and I just make straight lines and get the right size. And I do a couple of test prints, and then once I get the right size honed out, I make a whole bunch of these on a pattern, and then I just print it out. So let me show you. All right, so I got that honed out, so there's all the ones I needed. I did make a little one here because I was testing it for the smaller inner ring of panels, because those are smaller. I'm not going to light those most likely, but in case I wanted to test it. And then, well, that's the original vinyl one I did. And this is the smaller version, which I made to go on the inner rings, because they're still going to have a diffusion panel. So once I get those all honed in, like I did here, I simply print them out or cut them out on the vinyl 0.015 styrene sheet, and then pop them out. Now you can see they have squared off edges. I'm not that good to figure out how to do the rounded edges, but all I do is take an emery board and just kind of round off that edge, and they fit perfectly. So so those are going to work great for me to use on the lighting for the top ceiling in the passenger section. All right, so there are the 14 diffusion covers for the larger overhead lights that fit right down into the kit part. Really happy with how these turned out, and made it so much more convenient for me to use the vinyl cutter to cut these out. And all I had to really do was take my X-Acto knife, score a little bit along the lines just to make it come out a little bit easier, since the even at the 0.015 thickness, it still didn't cut all the way through at the highest setting. I'm sure there's other blades I could get, but it wasn't a big deal. It took me just about 10-15 minutes, get them out, and then I just took a emery board and I just rounded off the corners, since the opening in the kit part is rounded as well. And my skills aren't quite to the level of figuring out how to round that tiny little corner, so it was easier enough to make a straight shape with a sharp corner. So all right, so next I'm going to go ahead and start working on the rest of the light boxes, the 14 of those, get those cut out and glued together, and I'll be ready to start putting some of the electronics in and lighting up the at least the outer ring at this point. All right, so I went by and scored each of the parts for the light boxes, got them all removed, and then I just took this little straight edge here that I have of metal in my X-Acto knife and just went through and just lightly scored between each of these, because this is a template that folds. And then once I did that, I was able to just fold each of these pieces, and then I'll just use my Plastruck Bonding to glue them together to make a light box, just like this. So let me go ahead and get those all glued together, and I'll have all 14 of my light boxes. And then I'll be ready to start putting the Mega SMDs into them and get them wired up. All right, so I've started gluing in the I'm not sure what to call them, the diffusing pieces of styrene instead of the clear parts to diffuse the light. So I've got those first two glued in, and I have these other ones here ready to go. I do have to do just a slight bit of sanding with an emery board just to get it to fit in there nice and snug. So what I'm doing is this, oddly enough, see if I can show it. If you look at like that one right there, you can see between those little grooves. So for whatever reason, they didn't make that solid in between them on the outer ones. So light actually shines through that. So what I'm doing is, you can see the ones I did there, I patched them up so that wasn't happening. But let me try to turn it. I don't want them falling out, they're not glued in. Okay, oh, right. Hold on a second, let me move that. Right, so I'm holding that one in place. That one isn't glued in yet. You can see that light coming through those little ridges, just like you can on this one. All of these are doing that, because for whatever reason on the bottom, they did not make the plastic sealed all the way through. So you have those ridges extending on. I don't know why they didn't just make that a solid piece of plastic, but I don't like how that looks. You can't see it that well when it's on an angle, but what I'm doing is I am gluing these in with 5-minute epoxy, as you can see right here. But what I'm doing is putting a dab of black paint into it. First I tried the gray and that didn't work as well. So a little bit of black paint, and I've discovered before in other projects that you can mix a little bit of paint in with it. It'll still harden and set up and it won't be a problem. So that seems to be working. I just have to be careful not to extend it over that little lip where it sits on. It's a sizable lip. So I just try to make sure it gets down into those little grooves to stop them from getting light leaks through them, and then gluing those in place. So these two are glued in place, and I'm working on the other ones. I'm also, as I do each batch, I'm gluing on one of my Mega SMDs into the box. So there's one there, there's one right there. So this is a set of 4. So when I finish these 4, I'll get another set of 4. So there's 14 altogether around the outer ring. I have 3 of them that are sets of 4. That makes 12. And that leaves me 2 additional ones that I can put on there, that I have some single ones that I'm using for that. So that way I have the least amount of wires. These 4 go into 2 sets of wires, which I can trim down and then combine them all together. So let me keep working on this, and I will get these put in. I have all my light boxes made, obviously, and I have all these pieces cut out and ready to go too. All right. All right, so I've got the 2 halves of the floor glued together, pretty well solid now. And I fixed a few things, so I didn't like the gap in between here. There was no stripping like there was over in this part. So I just used some really thin styrene strip. It's right there. And I believe that is this one here. So 0.020 inches thick which is the same styrene sheet that I'm using to cut out with my vinyl cutter, and 0.060 inches wide, or you can have the millimeters. So there's the strips. They were a little bit wider than the ones that were there, so I just went ahead and put them over all four. And from what I can tell looking at the screenshots, it looks like those and the metal ring around there is some kind of metallic strip. So I used some of this Vallejo steel, which I really like. This is really good stuff. It's mono air, but I'm just brushing it on, and it goes on really nice. A lot of times it's harder with metallics. The pigment doesn't really come out really well, but this one did. So I like that metal right there. I also got all of the white stripping over the stairs to imitate the backlit part. There you go. That I'm not sure what the thickness is. Let me get a ruler and I'll kind of measure it if I can. All right, looks like about 3 millimeters. So that's what I would guess. I'm pretty sure this was measured in millimeters when I bought it. I just got it from my local hobby shop, and I think it's used for things like race cars and things like that. Self-adhesive stripping. It comes in a little roll, and I just cut off little pieces and carefully tape them on the back. I used a toothpick and a Q-tip to get them put down all together. What I do is I measured the first one, and then I put it down on my cutting board and just cut out all 16 of them to do what I needed. So I think that looks pretty good. And it successfully covers any of the seams. These two big ugly seams right here obviously will be covered by my carpet, which is the next thing I'm going to go ahead and attach now that I got these together. So I did go through with some sandpaper and scuffed it up pretty good around, which they recommend. So now I'm going to go ahead and put on the, here we go, the Ready Grass matte adhesive from Woodland Scenics. And as I said, this is pretty thin stuff. You hear that? You just brush it on and you let it dry, and then you go ahead and stick it down onto it. You can see sand surface. They give you 100 grit, which I didn't have, but it doesn't matter. They said to prime it with paint, but I'm not going to do that. I don't see the reason for that. That's kind of weird. Maybe if you're putting it on something else that's porous, but this is plastic, so I'm not going to do that. Permanent bond applied to surface and back of Ready Grass. Oh, wait a second. Oh, yeah. Repositionable bond applied to surface only, so I'm going to do it that way. Brush or roll a generous, even layer of matte adhesive on non-porous surface. Let dry until clear and tacky. Maximum working time 2 hours. It takes about a half an hour or so, I've noticed, give or take. Do not force dry with heat. Align matte and smooth with center to edges with a rolling device. A rolling pin works well. All right, so obviously I'm not going to use a rolling pin, but I've tried it on the bottom, worked out well. So you have some good working time, which is good. And I think if you put it on both of these, like the back of the other one and the matte and the surface, you probably would stick really well right away, and then you wouldn't have much time to do anything with it. So, and get the carpet on, and then I can do any kind of touch up that I need to do, little spots here and there with some of the gray, some of the yellow, after the carpet is on there and it's set up pretty good. And then I can go ahead and put on the other parts around this, but definitely coming together. I also got the elevator painted with my satin black, like the top piece, and then I masked off this area and painted this a light gray. I might go in and paint white inside these little squares. I think those do look different, but we'll see. I'm not going to put that on there just yet. We're going to get everything else done before that goes on, so okay. All right, and there is the carpet glued down onto the passenger section. I went ahead and glued on these side rails as well, since there's no reason not to. I already went through and touched up some areas that I needed to. All right, so looking pretty sweet. The carpet is darker in real life. Let me see if I can get a shot without the light on it to show you. So it's not going to work. Camera wants to always adjust it because it's looking at yellow and white and other colors. So it is a darker gray, so it's not quite as light of a gray as it appears to be, but looking pretty sweet. So this is pretty much done for here. I did get the side or the bathrooms painted. So I got the black on the outside, the gray in the middle, dark gray. And I did the yellow on these. The yellow is going to be a little tricky to match with the rest because these side rails I initially started with dark gray, then I went over them with some white to lighten it up, and then I went over with the yellow. So this one I just started with light gray, and they're a little too bright, so I'm going to have to take those down a bit because they don't quite match the rest of them. But not a big deal. And then I can get those glued into place. I'm also going to have to trim a little more of the carpeting along this edge because this has this flat part coming back which flattens it down. These do not. All they have is this piece. So it's not really getting anything to pull it down further to get it to be the same height as this other wall. But I'll get it down in. Looking really good. So those are coming along good. All right. All right, so I'm starting to light the cockpit. So I looked at some stills, and I'll show one here in a moment. And what they show is these back panels above the door are lit up with a red glow. I think these ones here might be as well, but I'm not going to worry about those ones. So I cut those out and made them nice and symmetrical. On the top of the roof, these panels do not light up. They're actually controls. They're dark and they have controls on them. This one doesn't either. But there are two dome lights right here behind them above the pilots, similar to the Moebius. Moebius has that, but they have the long cylindrical tubes coming down that have the red lights in them. So what I did was I drilled out some holes and I took some styrene tube and I cut it at an angle, as you can see right there. Because when you look through the cockpit, you can see that, but I don't want to see direct light. So I don't mind seeing the thicker part of that tube, but I wanted it to light up the whole cockpit, so I angled it back in the back, so it would kind of channel the light going in the back. All right, so let me go ahead and I want to get a black coat on the whole back of them. I started to do that, but let me get that finished, and then we'll start building some light boxes or getting some lights in those to light the cockpit. All right, so I got a coating of flat black over top of the whole outside of the ship, and I masked off, not the ship, the cockpit. I masked off the openings that I showed. You can see back there in the back and those little dome things. And so I'm doing a little test. So let me get and put on the light, just show you what that's going to look like. All right, so quite a bit of light coming into the cockpit. And you can see a little bit shining through those little tubes that I put in there because I still have to put some paint down inside of those. But those are going to work really well. So what I want to do is go ahead and get some red on those and see how they're going to look with the red. And then I can focus on some for the back as well. All right. All right, so I got some red onto the SMDs and then the light box. Light box isn't permanently attached, but there it is. Now, some people have asked me, why am I not using red SMDs for this project? So A couple of reasons. Red SMDs don't like to play nice with other SMDs. They are power hogs. And so for that very reason, when you get one from, like in this case, I have 3 volts from Evan Designs, they have a resistor on them, even though they don't need a resistor for 3 volts. They need a resistor because for whatever reason, I don't know why, but the red ones pull power and they don't work well with other ones. So you find that some of the LEDs just don't work. In addition, because they have to have a resistor on them, they are dimmer. And so it's a challenge. So what I have been doing and do a lot is I use clear Tamiya red and I put that over top of it and let it dry. And I turn it on until I get a nice consistency so it looks the way I want it to look. So here's the ones in the top. So I have those glued down with some 5-minute epoxy. And I'll put some black over those at some point to mask them. But you can see them coming through the tubes, and then I got red Tamiya down in there. So let me turn that on and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay. Now, you're not gonna see it well on the camera. Well, I shouldn't have turned it on, I'm sorry. But it is red. You can see the red on the side. You can see how it's showing it looking that way through those tubes. So it definitely gives me a nice red glow. Now, it does affect the brightness a little bit in that you're putting paint over top of it, of course. So even though they were very bright on their own, and also the 2 in the back were nice and bright, shining in the back there, they were still a little dim, not quite as bright as I wanted them to be. So what I did was, I had already attached, there's a little computer display right here in the front of the cockpit, which you do not see. So they even give you a decal for it, but there is no possible way to see that through the cockpit window. So I basically cannibalized it, cut pretty much all of it out until I could fit this Mega SMD in it. You can see that it's a big hole behind it. I put some styrene around it because you can see the sides, and I just don't want you to be able to see that hot spot of the light. So when you're looking through the cockpit window, you can see like the sides of it, but you can't see the actual light. And it's going to be shining back, so it's going to illuminate the vast amount of the cockpit. Plus I'm going to have the cockpit lights, the dome lights shining down on the backs of this as well. And I'll show you here in a moment when I put it together. To give me that red glow. I also painted the seats, these chairs, and the ones in the back black. I have to go and look at the images again. I think this door is a lighter color, so I might just go with a white just to give it a different color. Keep in mind now, everything is going to be bathed in red light, so you're not going to make out these colors. So I painted, I didn't go over this before, but I painted the entire interior a light gray. And it's not really a light gray, it's actually, what do I have there? I'm trying to find it. Here we go. A royal light gray. So it's very light, and it's hard to tell because you just see it in red, but there is a point when the door opens up, and if you look quickly, it looks like it is kind of a tan or a beige look on the inside. And I think that's what they will tell you to paint it in the instructions. But I didn't want the red playing off of other darker colors, so I just went with a light gray so that it's going to show me the red that I want. But it's going to give me some distinction from just the white plastic. And so what I'm going to do is, the only other color I might have would be that door, I think. There are some controls on here from the decals, which I will put on because you can see those pretty clearly. And there are some wall ones that go in these little panels on the side walls. So I'll put those in as well. I'm not going to put any, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with the ones in the top because those panels are darker. So I'm going to come up with something, maybe some other decal from another kit to put something in there that just looks dark and looks like some controls. The controls above the inner cockpit, absolutely no reason to put anything there. Again, you cannot see them under any circumstances. So let me see, is that part of this? No, I think it's part of the other Or is it this right here? Yeah, right here. So this little beveled area, lots of controls up there. Displays, more controls up here than down on the bottom, but there is no possible way to see that from the cockpit windows. So I'm not going to bother putting anything whatsoever in there. These panels, you can make them out for sure. This panel here, I think, is just the same color. So that's about the only detailing I'm going to do other than putting the pilots in it. I'm going to have 2 pilots, which I have received. And I'll go over those and show you. I got some from Shapeways along with the stewardesses. So let me go ahead and kind of pop this together and show you what this is going to look like with the added additional light in it. All right, so I haven't wired in that front LED yet. I just want to show the difference. So, and again, I have a light on. Let me turn that off here real quick. Get the best image. Okay. So it looks good on the camera because it picks up light a lot better. I really like that backlight. Let's see if I can focus this. And I like the light shining off of those back columns. Hold on a second, let me get closer here. There we go. So very cool. And those backlights look really red, by the way. They look too washed out in the camera. But you can definitely see how that red tint is throughout the cockpit. But it is a little dimmer in real life, so I definitely want to make it brighter. So let me put that other one wired in and show how that looks. All right, there we go. So considerably brighter red. And you can definitely tell from the camera. I can tell visibly as well. So it definitely puts out a lot more light. And you see what I was saying about how you cannot see that light. You can see the edges of that control. And I'm going to clean up the top that looks rough, but you can't see that actual physical light at all. And this is just the cockpit, not inside of the ship. So it's even different inside of that. So let me put that inside of the top dome and show you how cool that's going to look. All right, there we go. So very, very cool. You can make out those backlights back there, which looks kind of cool. Gives it some depth and some images. I still like how you can see the little glow on those back columns where it shows where those top lights are hitting. So if you go down low enough, you can see those. You can see that. But you're not seeing the direct ball, but it looks really cool. It gives you that look of the tube coming down like you see on the Moebius. Sorry. And again, if you go down further, you can see that control, but you cannot see the direct light coming out of it, which was the goal that I had. And I'm going to paint that too. I have to finish painting that gray, but very, very cool. So really happy with how that looks. Really happy with that red. And it looks even deeper and brighter in real life, so it goes really nicely with the gray of the ship. So, all right. So let me get that going, and I have to work on the pilots. And pretty much ready to start, put the decals on, pretty much ready to finish up the cockpit part at least. All right, so I'm finishing up the detailing of the cockpit. And there are decals, which I'll put on in a moment, but they didn't have anything in the top ceiling or these little parts here in the back, which clearly have some kind of controls. So I had a little set of some, they're not decals, they're not stickers, they're just on some clear, they're supposed to be backlit, I believe. So I cut out some of these and I just glued them in place over there, just to give it some detail. And the same with that there and over there. Now this little mess, which I will fix, I decided to go ahead and light the control there because it is a red button, and I've done that on other things like my Discovery. So thought I'd give it a try, but once I got it in there and glued in, it's just a little Z LED that's actually warm light, I believe. And I got it glued in place. Then I realized that there was a lot of light leak around it through the plastic since it's embedded in the plastic. So I painted black all around it except for the light, and I put some red on it. So I'm letting that dry, and then I'll either mask it off and airbrush it back to the gray, or I'll just brush it on, we'll see. But I want to take it back to the gray. But other than that, I think those are looking pretty cool, just to give it some detail. And let me go ahead and put the decals on. There really aren't too many. You have these two side panels. You have the controls right there. And I believe that is it for the cockpit. Of course, just fall out. Come on. Stop giving me grief. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That little thing on the display where I put the SMD, which you'll never ever see. But I'll put those on there, those four right there. And then that'll finish up the detailing for the cockpit, other than the pilots, which I will be painting next. All right, so I got the decals down, and I put some Walthers solver set, which snugged them down nicely. So there's the right side and the left side. You got the controls on the control panel on the front. And I did get that control painted, and I do have the light lit up. Let me turn off this light a second. All right, so you can see that. It's just a little light. And of course, there's going to be more red light washing over this. So, but that's still going to add a little bit of detail. It was still a little bright, so I put a little bit of Tamiya smoke, which is like a clear gray over top of it, to dull it down a bit, just so it's a little bit. I don't want it standing out like this flashing beacon kind of thing. It's not flashing, but that's all ready to go. And the top is done. So I can go ahead and get the pilots completed, and I'll be ready to put this together. All right, and there are my two completed pilots. I think they turned out really nicely. What I did was, as I showed in the previous stills, I took just some regular black electrical tape. I stuck it down on my cutting board, cut out little slices of it. So I have one coming down to the left, one on the right, well, vice versa. One across the center, and then two little pieces coming down to the sides. And they just kind of meet in the back, which you're not going to see. And I was concerned about it sticking permanently, so I just took a little bit of CA glue and dabbed it on all the spots around it to glue it in place. And then I just took some Vallejo steel and just dabbed it on a few spots to kind of give the impression of some buckles. I don't think they're quite silver, but I still wanted something to stand out within just a plain black. Obviously painted their faces and their hair and their hands. This guy has the controls in his hands already, and this guy has open hands. This one's actually going to be on the left side because I took the controls back off, and this one's on the right. So let me put those into the cockpit and show you how those are going to look in there. All right, there are the pilots just seated in the cockpit. They're not glued in permanently. Now I had to remove the controls on the left side, obviously, because that guy is holding controls in his hands, but you're not going to see that. I just put a little bit of black paint in there. The right side, one of his hands rests on it, or I can do it the other way. Let me see if I can do like this. Yeah, I can put it on the other one, but then his hand's kind of weird up in the air, so I'll probably just do the other side. So he's kind of looking over at the controls. So those turned out really nice. So I'm ready to just get those glued into place. And then I should be ready to go ahead and close up this cockpit. All right, one more thing I want to address in this video is I got the two different sets of figures, which I told you about. So I got the 3 stewardess figures that came from, these are both from Shapeways. And I showed the links in the video about the different sources. They're 2 different designers. So I don't want to disparage any of the designers, and certainly don't want to put them down, but you can see a really big difference between these 2 stewardess figures. Now, I can't really compare the two together to say whether one's right or one's wrong by comparing them, but I can compare to the actual parts of the ship. So here's the elevator. There's the door of the elevator. So let me show you a still real quick that shows the stewardess near the elevator and also Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke standing inside the door. All right, so as you can see from the film, clearly the door is big enough for them to fit through and not have to duck down or hit their head or anything. So that's the case with this one, where she is the right scale. So she could step outside of the elevator and not have some headroom still. Not a big deal. But this one cannot. If I put this one directly on top of the door, clearly see she is taller than the door. Oops. So clearly the wrong scale. She is not going to work, or at least when it comes to this. I don't know if the scale is 148 or not, but it doesn't fit this. So specifically, these were designed for this model, for the 148 scale. In fact, there were 3 different scales you could choose: 148, I forget what the other one was, maybe 155 or something, and 172, I think. But yeah, she's not going to work as far as that size if I simply compare her to the door. So, you know, I love this creator's work. I love the figures he makes. He does a fantastic job. These are clearly superior as far as their poses and how they look. They're amazing. But they're just not going to work. And I can't really combine them with these other ones, which are the perfect size. Obviously, the pilots are fine. This one's fine. So, definitely not going to be able to use those. I might as well show this one off. I got the little food tray. I just put some little dabs of color on there to look like the different color foods. The little blue for her Pan Am badge. I think that's gold or yellow on top of her little, whatever that thing is, holding her hair on. All right. So this one I can use, but the other ones I cannot use, which is a shame because I did want to have one seated and watching the movie. So that's going to kind of put me in a quandary. But yeah, I did send out a response to Shapeways about it because it's really not correct and it's not really going to work in my build. And even if I were just using these, they just would not look right. Putting her next to this elevator, she's at least like 6'3" and would not fit inside that door. So just want to let you know, use your own judgment. Hopefully they'll take note of it and get it fix the size of it and make the scale correct. But I did want to give that information out there. So. All right, there we go. There's my completed cockpit with my figures in it. Very cool, very sweet. I like how their straps stand out against their white suits because everything's just bathed in red light. You can see that control in the back there, which is kind of cool. It's subtle, but not too crazy. The red lights in the back. And again, those look red. Those are red panels. That little switch there, the button there for the door is red. You can just make out the top panels, but not the hot spot. You can make out those dark panels up there. And the controls. All right, so let me put that into the dome and we'll show you the finished cockpit. I still have to clean up all these wires, of course, and bring them together to one set of wires. All right, there we go, and there's the finished cockpit. Looking really sweet. It's a lot deeper red in real life than it looks like on the camera. But you can definitely see in there really well. There's my two pilots. You can see the controls. There's a little bit of a gap. It's not glued in all the way, but I might have to fill that gap in right there in front of the controls. You can see the side panels. You can see those back panels, which are really red. The little control lit up back there on the door, which is red as well. And if you look up a little bit, you can make out those little, whatever you call them, tube lights or cylindrical lights that I put in the ceilings. You can make them out, but you don't see the actual hotspot light. So, all right, so very, very cool. Very cool indeed. All right, so that's going to wrap up this video for this week. So definitely getting a lot done. I will continue working on the lights and light boxes in the passenger section and working on the figures for the passenger section as well. And also just saw a new release set from the same source that made my pilot figures. And the seated, I didn't show them yet or put them in yet, but the figure that's supposed to be Haywood Floyd, there's a new set out by the same one, and it is two of the seated stewardesses, which I want to get, and also his version of Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke sitting. So I'm going to go ahead and order a set of those and kind of sneak them in there somewhere, so they're just kind of hanging out in the back of the ship, and they don't know that they're over there hiding. So I'll get those ordered in, and they'll probably be a good week or so before those show up. I will see you next time. Thanks to all my new subscribers, and we are getting very close to finishing up the ship at least, and then working on the base for it. So, all right.